You're listening to the Batuta Advocates Weekly News Wrap on Desert Rock FM 96.5.
Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate Radio Show, recording live from the Diamantina Shire. Today's guest, I guess we're going to claim him as a proud Queenslander. He spent a lot of time in the southeast corner, but he spent a lot of time right around the country because he's one of those artists who obviously does the work. He's a man of many names and a man of many lives. You might know him as Tex Deadly. You might know him as Gregory. We know him as Tex Perkins. Thank you for joining us today.
You might even know him as Perko.
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 If you're on Perko basis with him, that is. Tex, at the moment, you're getting ready for a launch of the 30th anniversary of the landmark album, The Honeymoon Is Over. How's it looking? How's things?
I think it's been launched. I think I'm not sure whether there was a countdown, but no, I think it came out on Friday. So yes, it's been set sail.
It's off and running, doing well.
The champagne has been broken on the hull of the ship.
Beautiful. You've surprised everyone with a previously unavailable B-side, or some previously unavailable B-sides anyway.
Oh, I think they were all available. They were B-sides on singles.
Right.
But come to think of it, I wonder what form singles took in those days. I guess it was the very brief phenomena of CD singles.
Yeah, I remember them.
But yeah, they were all B-sides. You can't even call them B-sides because there's no flipping over CDs. No. So it was the main single track in. One or two extra songs. So, but yeah, they were all available, but I guess they were only available as a streaming thing.
You've compiled them all for us now. Tex, I want to talk about. I mean, it's been a lengthy career. 30 years isn't even the start of it, really. You've been around and you've been playing in different kind of imaginations, different incarnations for over 30 years, and we actually 42.
Yeah.
Geez, you look good.
Yeah.
We interviewed Don Walker the other day, who's been lucky enough to play with you over the years as well. I kind of want to go back to the start and how you managed to forge this career you have. Before we even had the term, I guess, in the mainstream, before we had the term indie, you were doing that before the ARIA Awards, but you still managed to keep that kind of credential. As they say in hip-hop, the hood still loves you. How did you get started, and where were you? Was it a West End thing?
No, actually, no. The West End is the cool part of Brisbane now, isn't it?
Yeah. And a few people, Vulture Street, a few people spent a bit of time there making music.
Well, actually, it was Wollongabba that was significant, really, in my early days with the band the Dum Dums. There was a place called the Wollongabba Blind Hall, which the gigs were very few and far between back there in Brisbane. So we just used to hire halls, and the Blind Hall was and put on gigs there ourselves. So the Blind Hall was a semi-regular one for us, and a bunch of other bands of that time. There was a band called the Pits. There was a band called Pork, and there was us, the Dum Dums, and but we were kind of unlike. And the only thing we shared with those bands was, we shared nothing stylistically, but I guess we were just about the same age, and we were all stuck in Brisbane. We're all fighting the good fight in Brisbane, because to choose to make music, especially in those days, like late 70s, early 80s in Brisbane, and especially sort of, the kind of music we were making, you were really, sticking your neck out, and it often got kicked, So the police, every time you actually left the house, you would have to expect you would be interacting with the police.
The special branch, you were talking? They had your number?
No, it's just the usual cops, because Brisbane was pretty dead. Literally, when the sun went down, anybody on the streets was like, what the hell are they doing there?
Yeah, Vegas,
it was like everyone would just go back to the suburbs.
Right.
And there wasn't a lot of the inner city wasn't really, happening.
Yeah.
It would literally kind of shut down. And like, it was mainly, suburban beer barns. That was, that's where music, took place. Bands like the Radiators,
Yep.
would play. There's this place called near where I grew up called the Homestead.
Yep.
Where I actually saw the Radiators in 1980. I have to say it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen, mainly because the audience was just absolutely wild. I was in there amongst it, but it was just insane, and I can't believe we kind of got away with it. But it was a pretty rough place, and rough things were allowed to happen.
So we're talking those Mansfield taverns or those Brisbane is a tavern town, you're right. And you're probably not getting those gigs outside of the Blind Hall and Woolloongabba in the city.
Yeah, well they were back in those days, like Brisbane, somebody would start to put on music at some pub. It would last about 2 or 3 months till Granny complained.
Yep.
And then the cops would just shut that shit down.
Yeah.
And then and then a few months later, someone else would give it a go, and the same thing would happen. So music, especially the type of music like alternative music or underground music, just was not welcome.
So there was a bit of a light industrial edge. You kind of had to find a place, not near anyone.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's why the Blind Hall worked in Wollongabba, because there was very few. It was a semi-industrial area, so there were very few neighbours that could complain. But I even though it was pushing shit uphill, I really kind of have a fondness for that era, and it's probably I'm not sure how it is these days, but I'm glad I kind of went through the do-it-yourself era, where you had to make things happen yourself rather than, I mean, Melbourne is just like, there's just gigs everywhere. Yeah. There's almost too many gigs.
Every pub's got a sound guy. In Brisbane, you got to learn that.
Not have to hear a band.
What was the experience like then, from going from Tavern Hall Brizzy down to Sydney and the pumping music scene?
It was like I walked into swinging London or something. it was like the contrast was so dramatic. Like, as I said, like being sort of slightly different in Brisbane, you were just a target, not only for the police but the general population.
Punks.
You'd be yelled at, and things were thrown at you, from passing cars and things like that. That was an everyday thing you got used to. And then I went to Sydney, and nobody was spitting at me. No one was yelling at me. There was a community of musicians that were working, and they were all great bands, and I know it was an absolute rebirth for me.
Yeah,
that's where my life began, really. And in 1982 in Sydney, and look, there was just great bands everywhere. The Johnnies were my friends, the Scientists were my friends, the Hoodoo Gurus, and so it was amazing. It was a
fun time to be around Sydney. You just mentioned there that the experience of people throwing things at you. I remember hearing a story about how someone famously threw a bottle when you were up on stage, split you, and then you performed out the rest of the set with blood streaming down the face before heading off to an emergency room. Real hectic stuff. What do the shows look like now?
Is that a myth? Is that the yarn?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that was one of the. That's on every. Surely that's on every rock and roll singer's checklist.
Yeah.
It's a kind of Iggy Pop, Jim Morrison kind of sort of to be bottled and but to and to be bleeding profusely from the head,
sweat and blood running down.
And I mean, luckily the wound wasn't huge, but there was because you so worked up and the body temperature elevated, the claret just pours out of you.
Yeah.
Did you see who got you? Do you remember where it came from?
There was so many things being thrown, but I did see that bottle coming. I saw it for the last 2 seconds, and I was a bit slow moving out of the way, but it clocked. It came from about 40 feet away, and I could just boom.
It's a pretty good throw from whoever it was in the crowd.
And it was, and it take. So the funniest thing was like all sorts of shit was being thrown, but and then Brian, the bass player, stepped up to the mic and said, "Stop throwing shit!" And then I pushed him out of the way and said, "Yeah, don't throw shit at them. Throw them at me." And like 3, 2, 1, bang! It was. I asked for it and I got it.
Well, it's always good to have a show goes on moment like that, I guess.
Oh.
You're going on tour again in July. Have the crowd still got it in them? When was the last time someone threw something at you?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was on my rock and roll checklist, and there's no need to go there again.
Yeah. You're not, and it's nowadays you're not breaking in crowds. You know, you've got fans coming to your shows, so it's not blokes.
Yeah, I think that was in the late '90s, and so it was probably the end of the kind of wild days.
Yeah.
Like especially for audiences. I mean, most of my audience is in their 50s now, so like, we recover slower. So like
the shoulders actually can't throw it from 40 feet away anymore.
So I want to talk about those wild days. I mean, we hear about pub rock or we hear about punk in Australia, and we hear about those wild days. You know, Robert Forster said to us, it was not a facade, these blokes, particularly in Brisbane, that he was cutting around. You know, there were punch-ons, there were piss-ups, it was absolutely wild. 20-year-olds still go to pubs. What do you think that was? Why do you think they were just that more tapped back then? Do you think it was Australia was a wilder place? Do you think maybe a lot of these people have kind of emerged into a middle class, or what?
Robert Forster's talking about Brisbane, pretty much. You know, it was, as I said, it was the fact that you weren't wearing flares and didn't have a mullet, and you know, like, was offensive to people. You're the very way you were presenting yourself to the world was like, and then it was, you know, then they all heard, these are punks, are they? Are you a punk? Yeah. Are you? But to tell the truth, I got bashed on the train before I was a punk. Yeah. So like if you were alone on a train in Brisbane, and you know 5 guys got on, you were going to cop it. Yeah. So like it wasn't just because in my punk days, it happened before my punk days. Yeah. You know, like, so Brisbane was a different place. But I mean, I'm sure a lot better now.
Yeah, I mean, aside from like, you know, those kind of undertones, like political and ideological undertones that you kind of dealt with, and I know every city had those, you know, those crowds and that kind of obnoxiousness. I know Brisbane was probably one of the toughest ones under Joe. But even the crowds, and you know, you hear about the Painters and Dockers gigs in Melbourne, or you hear about, you know, some of those things that were happening at the North Bondi Diggers. Like, what has happened, do you think, in the crowds, particularly young crowds? Why was it? Was it because a lot of these people were the sons and daughters of servicemen? Why were people so much more wild on the piss back then?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but well, come to think of it, when I moved to Sydney, as I say, it was an absolute golden era of, you know, in the early 80s, musically and culturally, from my perspective. But looking back on it, there was, you know, also, you know, there were plenty of skinheads around. So like that, you know, and I haven't seen skinheads since 1986. But I remember the last gig, we played support to a band called the Anti-Nowhere League, and there was about 300 skins there, and I really wonder what happened to those guys. You know, like, because they were so committed to that whole thing. I guess it's easy to not be a skin. You just let your hair grow and stop wearing cotton buds.
Well, they're all being arrested. They're all being arrested for historic crimes nowadays in Sydney.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Got a couple the other day.
I remember the leader of the Skins was a bloke called the Skull.
Jesus.
I remember being spat on by the Skull in Pitt Street. I was just walking along my own business, and then there was the Skull, and then he just noticed. Thank you, sir.
I mean, there probably is the argument there that the Skins all fucking made a bit of money in the construction housing boom and kind of gave up those beliefs and sat at home with a big television.
Yeah, well, I guess the only way is to know that anyone was a Skin is if they still had the tattoos. You know, but yeah, it's hard. I don't know why that was. It was a cultural clash. I mean, from my perspective, people just were really annoyed that you weren't like them. Yeah. And I guess it was a sort of the working class against itself. Yeah. You know, like because we are, it wasn't like, one class looking down on other. It was the working different sections of, the lower, parts of society and going at each other.
Tex, I wanted to ask a question a bit left field, not music related. We busted a myth there before. Turned out it was true. The bottle, the blood, all that sort of stuff. I want to ask about zone ball. I heard whispers about this game called Zone Ball that Tex Perkins got up and running. Where are we at with Zone Ball, and how would you describe it to the good people listening to our podcast?
Okay, well, the Cruel Sea mainly. We used to travel around with a football, and just for a bit of exercise, we would, find half an hour or whatever, in the day to just get a bit of exercise. And it was our preferred form of exercise, just get out and have a kick. Then we would sometimes have a kick inside the venue, before the crowd, before sound check. And therefore, it was a smaller space. So we would kick it to each other and then, okay, let's make this more interesting. Let's only mark one-handed. And then so we're kicking sort of, in a short space, like 15 metres away from each other. And then we just started to put rules around, that thing. And then we would define a space, and then slowly we kind of formed this. And then I eventually put a name on it, and it was called Zone Ball. And it was, I guess it was it's kind of like tennis. But
footy tennis. That's what I'm getting. I remember playing as a kid.
It serves to the other, to the other, and you have to make it difficult for him to mark. Yeah. It's a one-handed. So you're either doing little drop shots or bombs or, kind of like a scud serve, and it's fortunately, somebody put it in Wikipedia, and that's why you're asking me this question.
Yes, I saw it.
Well, I have played a few years now, but it gained legitimacy when a mate of mine is Bob Murphy, he played for the Western Bulldogs, and so he's played the zone ball, and he's a big fan of zone ball. And we used to meet up, and a bunch of us would play in the park in Melbourne, and so kind of that. I guess that was the peak of its legitimacy. And Bob was
when you got real footy players playing it,
yeah, real footy players playing it.
Nick Kyrgios and pickleball kind of thing.
But it's a great game. This could be a really good training, alternative.
Yeah.
But to tell the truth, I haven't played zone ball
well,
for quite.
Zone ball's 30 years. Oh, this is the 30-year anniversary of zone ball too, I guess.
No, it's probably around the maybe 20th.
Were the venue staff at the various places you were playing, were they particularly keen on zone ball with a footy getting kicked around inside while they're trying to set up?
No, they never got involved. No, we wouldn't do it anywhere that was
going to destroy.
We didn't break anything.
Yeah, we'd love to sit down with you and do a long form, maybe 2-3 parter with you, Tex. There's so much we can go over. But I just want to ask lastly, the 30th anniversary of the landmark album, The Honeymoon Is Over. What does this album mean to you?
Well, I guess it's the reason that I have the career that I always really wanted, which is just to be a working musician.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and not have to worry about charting and all that stuff, because that's happened. It's kind of the success of The Honeymoon Is Over, especially. You gave me the profile that allowed me to have the career that I have for for the last 30 years since it, and it set me up quite well.
It gave you the stripes to just do whatever you wanted,
it gave me the profile that to work in Australia and overseas, and it continues today. And but also I think the reason for my longevity is my ability and my willingness to do lots of different things, and I haven't put all my eggs in the one basket. If I can say, well, I've got more than one trick.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what we were asking at the start too, to remain unpigeonholed after a 42-year career.
Yeah. Well, also it keeps me interested too. Like things, I work with different people, and it's all a blessing to me. It's all thrilling and it's all interesting. So hopefully that that is conveyed to the audience as well. Well,
it brought you the arias too. Even though we don't have time to get to that yarn. We do realise an aria got stolen at the after party and
stolen. I left it behind. Really, that's the
yeah. I'll get it in the morning. I'm too flogged.
I mean, I won the thing, so what? I don't need it anymore.
Thanks for joining us, Tex, and all the best with the tour. What venues are we looking at here? We're
down in Brunswick. We've got the Memo Music Hall in St Kilda, Bird's Basement in Melbourne, Brunswick Ballroom. That's the one in Brunswick.
That's a ripper venue. The old
my current band, the Fat Rubber Band, is doing some gigs at start with in about 4 weeks. One's at the Memo Music Hall in St Kilda, and the other one's at the Brunswick Ballroom in Brunswick.
Yeah, that's a great old venue, that one.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks mate. Thanks for joining us, Tex. And all the best, and we'll do it again.
Let's do it.
For sure. Yeah, we'll go top to bottom. We'll go Tex Steadley. That's where we'll start.
Okay.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
All right, mate. See you.